Although setting their values at design time easily determines control properties, we can also change them at runtime by using code in our program. Let's see an example of setting control properties at runtime with our sample program.
For this chapter, we'll be using the form we created in the last chapter. We'll start by pressing F5 to run our program. Notice the checkbox at the bottom of the form is checked, and none of the option buttons are selected. Also, all of our controls are visible. We can change the properties of our controls at runtime by adding a few lines of code to our program. Let's get started by clicking the Stop button on the toolbar to return to the work area, then double-clicking on the form. This brings up the Form 1 code window. Let's explore the code window. The Object pull-down menu to the left shows us we are working with our form or program, and the Procedure pull-down on the right tells us we are setting values that will take place when the form loads into memory or when our program starts. We'll discuss objects and procedures a little later in this chapter, but for now we should remember that anything we type in this section of our program will happen immediately after we press the F5 key on the keyboard to run the program. Since we are going to change the properties of our controls within the program, it's important to know what controls we have on our form and what their names are. We can get a listing of these by clicking the down arrow just beneath the title bar of the Properties box. In the drop-down list box that appears, we see our object names followed by the type of item they represent.
When we control aspects of an object on our form, we override their default values with our own when our form loads. Let's change the properties of our controls through program code at runtime.
We first want the middle option button to be selected when the program runs. We look at our list of controls and find that its name within the program is Option 2. In the code window, we type Option 2 dot. When we type the period, a list box appears with a choice of properties we can assign to this control. This box appears because the Auto List Members checkbox we saw in the Options box earlier in the tutorial was, by default, checked. This feature helps users by providing information that will assist us in completing the statement we are typing. We continue by typing the word value and see the list box below our cursor updates by scrolling to and selecting the value choice. This is an excellent way for us to confirm we have typed in the correct property on our line, because if we don't type a correct property, the list box will not update for us. Next, we type an equal sign and see the program prompts us with two values for this particular property. Another of Visual Basic's features, this helpful list will keep us from entering wrong values for our properties. We press the T key on the keyboard, notice the true choice in the list is highlighted, and press Enter to allow Visual Basic to finish our line for us. We also notice that Visual Basic adds blank spaces before and after the equals sign. It does this in an effort to make the code easier to read. Once we get used to this method of entering code, these enhancements Microsoft has added can save us a lot of time and effort. Notice on the line we typed, we have placed the control followed by its property, then set the value for this property. This same method can be used to set every value for all our properties. Let's try another one. We'll click the down arrow in the Properties box and scroll down to the bottom of the list where we see the name of our text box. We position our cursor below the line we just entered in the code window and type txt_entry1.text equals open quotes, new value, close quotes, and press Enter to change the text displayed in our text box to read the words new value. Next, we'll override the picture property of our picture box. Remember, our picture box is displaying a sample BMP file when the program runs. We can change this by typing the following line: pct_pict1.picture equals load picture, open parentheses, open quotes, close parentheses, and press Enter. The pct_pict1.picture tells Visual Basic we are working with the picture property of our picture box, named pct_pict1, and the load picture with the double quotes loads a blank value into this property, leaving our picture box blank at runtime. Next, let's change our checkbox to be unchecked on startup. We again pull down the object list under the title bar of the Properties window and find the Check 1 entry, which reminds us that we didn't change the default name Visual Basic assigned our checkbox, Check 1. In the Code window, we type check1.value equals unchecked and press Enter. Now we are ready to run our program and view our changes. We press F5 to run the program and take a look at our controls on the form. Notice the text in our text box reads New Value. Also, the middle option button within our frame is selected, our checkbox is not checked, and our picture box is empty. We press the Stop button to return to the Visual Basic work area.
Since we placed our changes to the program in the form load procedure, the properties of our controls were changed as soon as the program loaded Form 1 into memory.
Events control when code is executed in a program, and users interacting with any control on our form can trigger events. Let's see how this works. We'll click the View Object icon in the Project Explorer to bring our form to the top. The quickest way to jump into using events and procedures is to use our form as a guide. Let's make our Exit button drop out of the program so we don't have to click the Stop button on the Visual Basic 6 toolbar. To do this, we will need to write code for the Exit button, so we double-click the Exit command button on our form and are presented with the code window. Notice a sub-procedure section has been added in the code window above the form load section we edited earlier. Also, the object drop-down tells us we are now working with CMD Exit, which is our Exit button, and the procedure list box says Click. The click in this field lets us know that any code we write in this sub-procedure will happen only when the user clicks the Exit button on our form. This separation of code keeps things organized in our program and helps greatly in debugging errors. If a control is not working properly in a program, the code within that procedure is the first place to look for problems. Since we want our program to end when we click the Exit button, we type End in the sub-procedure. We must make one more change before we can try our new Exit button code. Earlier, we changed the Exit button's Enabled property to disable it. But unfortunately, that will prevent us from testing it. In the Properties list, we scroll down to the Enabled property and double-click it to re-enable the Exit button. Now we press F5 to run our program. We click the Exit button and we are returned to the development environment. Understanding these concepts is very important. In the code window, the private sub CMD Exit click at the top of the section indicates the code within this section is in a sub-procedure that only happens when the user clicks the Exit button. The End subline, placed after the code, drops us out of that procedure. Every time the Exit button's click event occurs, in other words, when the user selects the Exit button, the sub-procedure CMD Exit click executes and the end line is processed, stopping our program. Let's try another example by clicking the View Object icon in the Project Explorer, and we are returned to our form. We want to add some code to our checkbox to make it display the sample BMP file in our picture box every time the user clicks it, so we double-click the checkbox on our form and are again presented with the code window. Notice we are now in the Check 1 click sub-procedure, so whatever code we enter here will happen only when a user clicks the Check 1 checkbox. Remember that checkboxes have a value property that can either be checked, unchecked, or grayed, so let's use this value property and the first two options to see if the user has checked or unchecked our box. In the code window, we'll type if check1.value equals unchecked, then, and press the Enter key. We'll cover the if-then conditional statements in more depth in later courses, but for now we'll type this section, then explain how it works when we're finished. Next, we'll scroll down to the Form Load Sub-Procedure section to remove the line from this sub-procedure. We are completely removing this line from the Form Load Sub-Procedure because, with the addition of the Check 1 click sub-procedure, it is no longer needed here. When we change the value of a checkbox or option button, whether by clicking the control on the form or by reassigning its value using Visual Basic source code, the click sub-procedure for that control will be called. When this happens, the source code within the sub-procedure will be executed. Let's continue working with the Check One Click sub-procedure. We scroll back to our Check One Click sub-procedure section and paste the line under the one we just typed by pressing Ctrl plus V and press the Enter key. We type else if check1.value equals checked then, and press the Enter key and Ctrl plus V to paste another instance of our line into our sub-procedure. Next, we'll move the cursor to the double quotes in our second line and type the path to our BMP file, c:/learningfiles/via1.bmp. Between the quotation marks. We press the End key to move to the end of the line, press Enter to move to a new line, then type end if to finish our if statement. Let's examine this new section of code. Because checkboxes can either be checked or unchecked, anytime we wish to do anything when the user clicks a checkbox, we must check its value first. When the user clicks the checkbox, the first line in our sub-procedure checks to see if the value property of our checkbox is unchecked, and if so, it executes the second line of instructions, which loads nothing into the picture box. If the value of our checkbox is not unchecked, then we move to the else if portion of our statement. Else if will check the value of the checkbox to see if it is checked. If the else if statement determines that the checkbox is indeed checked, then it performs the next statement, which will load the BMP sample into our picture box. The end if line just ends the test of the value of the checkbox. Now let's run the program by pressing F5 and see that by default our checkbox is unchecked because of the property setting we assigned in the form load procedure. When we check the checkbox, our picture appears. We press the Exit button's shortcut keystroke, Alt plus X to end our program, and are returned to the Visual Basic work area.
Let's continue setting control properties within sub-procedures by using the option buttons already placed on our form.
Remember, only one option button on a form can be checked at any one time, and selecting one automatically deselects any others on the form. We can control the background color of our picture box by checking the values of the option buttons. We first click on the View Object icon on the Project Explorer to bring our form to the top. Here we click our topmost option button to select it, then click in the Caption Property field and type Red. Next, we click on the middle option button to select it, then click in its Caption Property field and type Blue. Last, we click the bottom option button to select it, click in its Caption Property and type Green. Now we click the frame to select it and change its Caption Property to Colors. Now that all the names of our option buttons make a little more sense, we can start entering code for them. We double-click the red option button and we are returned to the code window. In the upper right corner, the procedure listed is click. For the click procedure with the red option button, we type pct_pict1.backcolor equals VBRed. This will turn the background color of our picture box red when it is selected by the user. We highlight the line we just typed, click Edit in the menu bar, and we choose the Copy command. Next, we click the View Object button in Project Explorer and double-click the blue option button to return to the code window. We press Ctrl plus V to paste a copy of our line here and change the red listing in our line to blue. Next, we click the View Object button in Project Explorer and double-click the green option button to return to the code window. Now we press Ctrl plus V to paste a copy of our line in the click procedure for the green option button and change red to green. The values we are using are predefined constants, and Visual Basic allows us to use them anywhere in a program instead of entering actual RGB color values. Let's see how our changes work by pressing F5 to run our program and toggling through the option buttons. Notice the background color of our picture box changes as we select options, and we can still load the bitmap picture file associated with the picture box by clicking the checkbox at the bottom of the form. Let's click the Exit button to stop our program. Let's save our work from this chapter with a new name. Because we have previously saved these files, the save process will be a little different. When Visual Basic saves a project file, it simply saves the information it needs to locate and loads the files of our program. Unfortunately, it doesn't save the form. We must do that ourselves. If we plan to change the name of the form, as we are about to do, we must also remember to save the form before we save the project. If we don't do this, then the project file will be pointing at the previous version of the form, in this case the Chapter 2 form. If we change the form's name first, the project's links are updated to point to the new form, and we can then save our project. So let's save our form. From the File menu, select the Save Chapter 2 .form as command. In the dialog box that appears, we type Chapter 3 and click the Save button to save the new form. Next, from the File menu, we select the Save Project As command. In the dialog box that appears, we again type Chapter 3 and click the Save button to save the updated project. Let's review what we covered in this chapter. We started by changing the properties of controls at runtime by entering code that overwrote the value of their properties. Next, we coded the Exit button's click procedure to end the program, and added code in the click procedure for the checkbox to load our sample BMP file. We then studied our conditional text section of code to understand how to verify the value of a checkbox through program code. Finally, we added lines to change the picture box's background color in each of our option buttons, then ran our program and saved our work for this chapter.